Hi, now that we've annoyed Braden, welcome back!
Welcome back to part 2.
So, in this part, we go over the rest of our poker advice, some fantastic stories, and the strategies we think are good for beginners and even some advanced players. So, we hope you love the first one, we hope you love the second one. Oh, and, by the way, as a bonus for being so patient with us, here's a new opening sketch.
What do you got left over there?
Not much.
You want to make this a little more interesting?
I can't cover, so what do you have in mind?
Wager your soul?
But I don't... Yeah, I'll wager my soul.
Awesome. Got one on the line, boss.
Got a soul in line, do you? And it's...
Hiya!
Hey,
We have a history.
No, you're dumb. You are very dumb. You see, this thing right here doesn't have a soul. I could literally stick my hand inside it and it comes out the other side. Problem is I won't be able to pull it back out because it's a sucking vacuum. It's literally like my toilet at home. It's just nothing but terror.
You were really gonna bet your soul when you don't have one?
I see. Oh, you stayed out of here. Good for you. Ooh. How about I bet your soul back? Hey, do you know Callahan's real name is...
Not another.
So many toilets. Getting out of here.
Next tip, learn the math. Like, even... There are people who say stuff like, okay, I am, and even you'll hear the top-notch professionals say this. Oh, I play the player, not the cards. And you'll hear another one say, I play the cards. Every high-level pro does both.
Right.
But
you still need to know.
You still need to know it.
You need to know if you have a 33% chance of hitting your flush, and you look at the table and somebody's pushed at a bet, and you're like, I'm only getting like $1 for every 4 that I'm putting in, right?
Yeah.
That's not.
It's a bad deal. And even the players who say, oh, I play the player, who are professionals, they can look at a table, look at their hand, and they know, oh, I have a 2 in 3 chance of hitting, or I have a 1 in 3 chance of hitting, or for each dollar I'm putting in, I'm potentially getting 4 back, so it might be worth chasing in this case. And here's the thing, even if you are not good at high school math, there's no excuse not to be good at poker math if you play a lot. There's 52 cards in a deck. There are 13 in a suit. There's 4 of each number. All the division and all the percentages are based on those. If you do the math hundreds and thousands of times, it becomes second nature, even if you weren't good at math, because it's a very narrow set. And the numbers change a little bit if you're playing like Omaha high-low versus, versus Holdem. But the concepts are still the same, and the numbers are still the same. And you cannot be a high-level poker player and not have at least the poker math part of it down.
But that is, when I first started, I could do the math easy, and I only played statistics, and I got ran over.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just completely... And I was playing in friendly home games. They knew... Or they were good, because I had just started out. They knew I was only playing the statistics, right? So all they had to do was they said, okay, all we have to do is increase this pot to the point where his statistics don't play anymore, and he folds. So they were just doing that. They're just like, oh, all I have to do is this. But once I realized that, and I started to change that up, they had a good laugh about it. They're like, oh... Okay.
You finally learned. Yeah. Welcome to the group.
Welcome to the game. Yeah, exactly. And it took me Probably months.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And these were small stakes games, or just because we were friends and everything like that. But it's still, I couldn't figure it out. I was like, I'm playing all the statistics. Why am I losing? And the answer was they weren't. They could do the math, but then they figured out I was the type of player that was only playing math, and that's a problem. They knew how I played. If they know how you play and you play every hand exactly the same way, you can't win the entire game anyway.
Yeah.
You might win a hand, but you're not going to win the night for sure.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's one of those where there's definitely a reading involved from the patterns of how a player plays. I mean, at home games like this, I always find funny when you have the multicolored chips, because you'll find a person who seems like just a stone statue. And they'll do something weird like, oh, the red counts as 5 and they toss it in. Okay, they have something. If they toss in 5 whites, they're bluffing, and they don't even realize they're making that difference.
And that's hard to pick up on.
Yeah.
But
And if you do that at home games, like, oh, that's the type of thing you learn when you do enough hands and enough types of playing. And that's the one other thing that online poker was really good at, was you could learn the math because you were doing so many hundreds or thousands of hands in a day. Whereas dealing out on a table, you're going to get less, but you get so much more experience reading other people. And each one is a skill I think you have to some extent to make it work.
you have to be a balanced player.
Yeah. And for me, I think a part of it is also learning what type of a player you are. And in fairness, this is kind of an intermediate type skill, because you have to get through all the basics. You have to get a solid foundation. You have to be able to win consistently before this becomes a big one. But, like, you'll hear poker players say, like, oh, I'm a conservative player. I'm an aggressive player. And every poker player who makes money shifts gears at some point.
Yeah.
You know when to do that. But I've seen people who, they're at their best when they play almost aggressive to the point of being semi-reckless, but then they know when to pull back.
Right. There's neither one is a more profitable style.
Oh, yeah.
There's aggressive and there's conservative.
Professionals
It just
hit the whole spectrum.
It's whoever, right, and you're going to balance that, but you're going to find your sweet spot, or if you're a good player, one of those two, or maybe it's not. Maybe you're a wild player where you're completely unpredictable. I hate those people.
Daniel Negreanu is the pro example where
it's just
you don't
those
know
people,
how.
because I have trouble getting a read on them. But here's the thing: if I'm in a game with a wild player, I try to stay out. I can usually target the other players.
Yep.
I try to stay out of their way. Those people are really hard to read, right? Like it's because you have no fucking idea. So
And sometimes they don't know what they're doing until they do it, which makes it even harder.
right, yeah. If they have no idea what they're doing in a particular hand, you cannot get a read.
Yeah, and as well as I'm the other side. I tend to be very conservative, but I know exactly when to ratchet things up and make my shot. And to me, it's like you want to play in your comfort zone, because I've tried the extra aggressive way, and I can be very good at it for a short period of time.
Yes.
And I get mentally tired because it is not in line with my style of play that I can settle in for 6, 7, 8 hours. And when you get tired, you make mistakes and you misread and you lose money.
He's right. My favorite time to do it is actually in tournaments. I'll play conservative the whole night, and then when it gets close to the cash table,
Oh, yeah.
I'll turn up the heat. The
Again.
blinds have gone up close to the cash table. People are watching those other players. They don't want to be the one that goes out, and I'll just start turning up the aggression and stealing pots. By the time they realize it,
Again, why you don't slow play? Because I've been at online tables where they knew I was doing that, where I was bullying the table, and they still weren't willing to stand up to me. And so you rake in some blinds, and you rake in some blinds. And I've had tournaments where I was in the bottom third, and I moved up to the top third by the time people hit money. You just gave me ammunition to make a shot for the final table.
right, exactly.
And once again, you have to read that. At one table, I tried that, and one guy took my shit for one round. But then, after we fenced a little bit and it was clear no one else was going to step up,
He took turns.
when it came to me, those are my blinds, those are my blinds, those are my blinds. When it went to past a certain point, those were his blinds.
That's not collusion.
That's not collusion. That's professional courtesy. Because we're not working together. We just knew, okay,
Yeah.
at this point, he'll let me have these without fighting. But if he bets me here, I'll fight him. And if I bet him here, I'm fighting him. That's the rest of the table playing very badly. And at that point, we are just splitting the pots.
They made a nonverbal agreement that is out there for everyone to see. The table
knew
was
what
just
we were doing.
understood, right?
Yeah, we didn't know each other as
didn't.
players. We were just, fine, we're going to keep betting and stealing blinds until one of you stops us. And, okay, this person's willing to stop me, but he's also willing to split the table if I defer one or two of these hands. And
sometimes you'll get in the real enjoyable games, I get in there where nobody's letting that shit fly.
yeah.
Like there's right, nobody's able to steal it. You're just like, oh, this is the final table.
Yep.
Got it. You're just like, okay, nobody should do that. Because, and you'll only get to experience these when you actually play.
Yeah. And, yeah, it's one of those where as you play more, you understand what's going on in the game. And as you understand what's going on in the game, like I said, some would say that's a gray area, but it's a common practice because those players aren't saying, oh, we're going to double up and go after any other player. Like, had any other player at that point gone all in because they were done with our crap, oh, yeah, I would have folded. I'm not taking the chance at that point. But no one did.
He happened to have that sweet pat hand, right?
Yeah.
So, because that happens too. They're like, I'm done with this shit. I'm all in. I happen to have aces.
Yeah.
So sorry, kid. Yeah. So, but that also brings another point about blinds here.
Mm-hmm.
If it's all just a bunch of people calling around and you're in the big blind or the small blind, I've seen people in the big blind throw away their hand when they didn't want it or they didn't like it as a starting hand. That's stupid. You should never do that. I don't care how bad it is. The 2-7. Play it.
If you're getting a free look.
You don't know. It could be 3 2s on the flop. You just threw away a great hand. Or it could be 2 2s and a 7, right? And then somebody else ends up hitting.
Yeah.
You don't. They could catch a piece of it. Take your free chance at the money. The small blind, I can sometimes get it. If your hand is really weak and you're just like, all I have to do is get past this one and I'm on the button, we're close to the money, I don't even want to throw in that extra small portion. I can kind of get that. But then again, if everyone else is in that hand, your odds are really good for throwing in that extra half a bet. So
yeah, half a bet, and if you just happen to hit a weird combination that gives you the nuts,
and maybe you don't.
Yeah,
maybe the flop comes out, you catch no piece of it.
Someone bets, then you throw it away.
And here's the other thing, this annoys me. So the big blind comes along or something like that, and they all get in for free. The flop comes out, they hit none of it, and they fold. The fuck? Don't do that.
Yeah.
Right? Wait for someone to bet. That is part of the game. Always take your free chance. If you've determined you're going to fold, I'll wait it out. I already know. I was like, there's nothing I can catch on this board. I'll still check, right? Somebody bets, it rolls back around to me. Now I fold, right? That's just, you're dramatically changing the game. And it's kind of that's an etiquette thing.
Yeah.
It's a dick thing to do. Just don't.
Well, it's not even good strategy, because unless you're really, really short stacked, if you have a bunch of people check and just kind of limp into the pot, then you have a bunch of people check again, throw out a bet. I've been surprised how often a relatively small bet has 6 people fold, and I'm sitting there looking at 3-7 offsuit.
Right.
And so that loser hand changes my math because I just want to pot with it. And that's part of the people who make money versus poker versus the ones who don't, is I turned a hand that had no potential into a win.
Right. And let's say that you do catch a piece of it, right? A small piece.
Yeah.
Let's say you're in a beginning position, flop comes out, and you caught a pair of 6s or something like that on the board, and you've got kind of a crap other one. I will often fire the first shot if I'm in opening position. It's not going to be a huge bet, but it's going to be something. to make other people fold. So now I know who potentially caught the piece. But there were so many people in there, maybe somebody raises an ungodly amount. I'm going to get out of the way probably.
And it was relatively cheap to get that information.
Right. But on the next one, if something, whatever comes out, it doesn't even matter. If I check, they might think I'm setting up the check raise.
Yep.
And I might get a free look at the river to see if I happen to catch that. And if it does come out on the next card and you hit that second card in your hand or something like that, now you can make an even better bet, right? So it's
And other times you'll just have things happen like, well, maybe you have 2 high cards and none of them hit. Like you have Queen King, and it's like a 2, 5, 8.
yeah.
And you know what? I'll just put out a bet, see what happens. And that guy with pocket 3s who had you beat folds. That guy who caught the lowest card showing on the board folds. Well, you once again turned a loss into a victory for a small bet. And those add up. They
Now-
don't have to happen that often to make a big difference in your bankroll over a year, especially.
And let's talk about, do we want to talk about hand strength at this point or no? Starting hand strength.
I'd say most people who see this will either be able to get the resource or know it. If you think there's something people screw up, jump in with that. Like they're gonna know
Okay.
pocket aces versus ace king and stuff.
We're talking pre-flop.
But, yeah.
Hands can matter, right? You got aces, you got kings, you got queens, eights, any
Yeah.
pair, suited run or something like that. Okay, some hands are better than others statistically because we know nothing, right?
Yep.
You've got pocket aces, right? And you bet or you put a raise in there. Do not slow play those.
Yeah, never. They're never.
I mean, there's a rare exception. You'll know it when it comes up, but as a rule, just don't do it or be ready to fold them. But you bet you've raised the pot with pocket aces. You get 4 colors anyway, and the flop comes out 5, 6, 7, and they just start betting insanely. Throw them the fuck away.
Yeah.
Somebody caught their straight. They caught 3 of a kind, something like that. Just bail.
The percentages change.
Right.
And if you
There is no pat hand once the cards are showing.
Yeah. Once you if you watch a lot of the ESPN World Series of Poker, which I admit, not the greatest learning device, but I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's still fun.
There are moments. Watch for those hands where the odds go from 80% to 19% and then switches to 98 to 2. That's what can happen with a flop. You can have pocket aces, pocket kings. If it's 5, 6, 7 of diamonds and it's heavy bet, heavy bet, heavy bet, your cards are worthless. I don't care if the aces were best pre-flop. You're not in pre-flop anymore, and that's the key.
If you have the ace of diamonds in that scenario,
I'm assuming you don't. But that's
I
fair.
was gonna say maybe, and I've still thrown it away. Yeah.
If you have 2 black aces and it's 5, 6, 7 diamonds, and you have 3 giant bets coming into you, especially some all-ins with all-in calls, just walk away. You don't want to. You don't want to add to their pot.
There is one of my favorite scenarios where I will bluff. Okay, so if everybody's chasing the flush, right, or if you think that they are, and that flush card hits, but you don't have the flush, but you do have the nut card, right? Like if there's, let's say that you have a king 4 offsuit, right? You've got the king of diamonds, and the ace of diamonds hits that board on the river. You now know that somebody out there, if they hit their flush, they don't have the nut flush because you've got that king of diamonds. You can take a stab at bluffing that hand if you think they'll fold. And then it comes down to playing the player because in the end, they know they don't have the highest hand. You know that you don't have anything, but you know that there's no way that they can either or have the highest one. So you can try to play that out. That's a good example of a good bluff.
But again, it's because you have information on the hand and the situation
And the players,
table,
in
and
theory.
the players.
Yeah.
And so, and it can move from the beginner to advanced area seems grayer. And fairness, I feel like if you have really good fundamental basics, you are in the top 20% of players. And then it takes a lot of grinding and experience, and you can pretty much get to the top 10%. And then at that point, there's so many incremental things. That's where all the advanced tactics kind of make up the last 10% of
And
the players who really
I
differentiate
don't even know if I was
themselves.
in the top 10%. I might say that I never really got there.
I'd say
it's
we,
still profitable if you're in the top
yeah,
20.
I'd say we both might be just because it's hard to underestimate how many bad players there are. But look, I was never going to a World Series of Poker. That just, yeah.
Maybe if I won a tournament.
Look, if I had the cash there
Yeah.
and for the experience, sure. But I was never threatening Dan Harrington or Phil Ivey, or any of those names, and that's fine. Like at college and grad school, when I had barely time to, I didn't have time to eat or sleep or breathe, and I could still just start with $20 and off of that make $20 a day in 2 hours and $30 a day and $40 is I had to start out on the $1 tourneys because I had $20, but I made that to several thousand,
Yeah.
and then you went to other games and stuff, and that was something I could just do at 3 a.m. because there was something there. And if you're not sure where your game is weak, and I'll say this is kind of a both ways. Learn from the pros. Like some of the books on poker out there are amazing.
Read.
Doyle Brunson's first two books are
Yeah.
kind of the foundation for all modern poker pros, period. There was a time where reading those pretty much put you in the top 10%. That's not true anymore. But if you want the foundation, you read both of his books. Definitely.
Yeah.
There's so much there and so many good skills from one of the legends. Phil Hellmuth's books on poker were outstanding. I think
I
they're some
haven't
of,
actually read
I
them.
think they're actually some of the best of poker pros put
Okay.
out that improve your game. My winning percentage jumped up after reading those, and I was already making a living doing this at that point. There were others. I think Dan Harrington has one. I think Heath Ledger has one. There's a lot of really good books. Now, the flip side of that is you don't mimic them because they are playing their style from a lifetime of honing their skills, but learn from them all day long.
And try it out, right?
Yeah.
If there's a tip in there, try it. It might fall into your comfort zone, your golden zone, your area. And if it doesn't, okay, right? Now you know that.
Yeah.
But you might still be able to identify it for other players doing it.
Yeah. And it's another weapon in your repertoire. Like I got slightly better at reading tables. I'd say about half of my good aggressive play came after the Phil Hellmuth book because he put it in a way that I hadn't thought of it before. And when I looked at the table the way I usually would. Then I kind of think of how he'd look at the table, and I realized, oh wait, if I do both, somehow I'm getting a little bit more information, and I just know when to make that aggressive move. And if that was a hard thing to do as a conservative player, learning the time to make that aggressive move can literally double your earnings.
Yeah.
And that comes off just a few hands a night, if even a few hands a week can make a difference like that.
Yeah.
And some of those books, some of the most popular ones, will actually include the link in the description. And so that way, if you want to build the poker library, like almost every poker player I know who is at our level or making money there, they have a favorite poker book or they have a small library of poker books or gambling books.
Yeah.
So, all the information in the world, if you don't
Get
take
it.
it, you're just behind. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's free. Or it's like a couple Amazon purchases and you have 80 years of poker playing experience that you can learn from.
You
for
can probably
less
find
than
a
$100
used one.
Oh, yeah.
Like
$5,
you don't even
$10,
yeah,
yep.
you don't even have to but when you're first starting out, here's the other thing. Expect to lose.
Oh, yeah.
There's knowledge in losing. As long as you can identify your play, analyze your play, why did I lose, right? If you just lose and you're just like, "Oh, well, that just happens." You've missed the opportunity.
Yeah.
Um
And if you ever find yourself saying stuff like, oh, if that person had played right, I would have won the pot 'cause they were folded. You're not playing right. You're not as smart as you think you are. You're not learning. You need to step back and reevaluate before moving on. Because
everybody sucked out on me all night.
And you may have had a bad night, but if that's kind of the mindset of what happened, you definitely were either on tilt, making massive mistakes, and probably both. And if you show up to a table on tilt, making massive mistakes, we will definitely take your money.
And here's the other thing. I've gone on tilt before.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody's immune from it.
Oh yeah, I've had some days.
Identifying when I'm tilting. You want to know my real strength as a player? Walking away.
Yeah.
I can leave a game when I'm behind. I don't chase that money. If I go, nope, I can just pick up. I'm just like, you know what? I'll catch you guys tomorrow. And I'll just pick up and leave. I just lost money. because I'm not playing my game. I'm now off of my game, and when you're off your game, you're going to lose.
Yeah. And
So-
it can be really insidious because a lot of times, sometimes you imagine Tilt, you see the big blow ups from Phil Hellmuth or something, which it can go that far. A lot of times, Tilt is really subtle, and that's where it's dangerous because you start losing a lot of money. Because if you don't realize that, hey, my play shifted just a little bit, at a good table, that's enough to go from one of the winners to, oh, I just lost half my bankroll.
And I've been in a situation before where there was a really bad. So usually when I'm going into a casino, I'll take the bankroll that I'm prepared to lose at that moment.
Yeah.
And if I lose it all, I'm done. I do still have, and I'll leave my credit cards or bank cards or everything like that back in the car, because I'll come to my, when I get to the car, by then I've come to my senses if there's a problem there. But also, I have rushed out to my car. I've lost my entire buy-in, right? And rushed to my car to get my card to get more money. Because the person that beat me was just awful and just sucked it out. And then he just snapped off a few of them. And I was just like, I have to get back in that game. This guy is so bad. And it was just a race for me to get to the cash machine and get more money out so that I could get back in the game before he gave away all my money to the other really good players.
Right? You had enough experience and read at that point to know I wasn't on Tilt.
Right.
In that circumstance, it was a really bad player who got lucky, and I can win my money back if I just get back in
Exactly.
time.
Just had to get back in there. I was like, he's not keeping that money. Can I get to it before everyone else? And it's at that point, but that's just an educated. I wasn't even upset. At any point, I was excited. I was like, there's this horrible player.
Yeah.
Horrible players, I love you. Like, just get in there, right? And if you beat me, or you happen to suck out against me, or do something like that, it's okay. I'm not going to get miffed. It's part of the fun for you. You can have fun and still lose money to me. That's great. And maybe you even walk away with something in that night, and even if you're a bad player. That's great too. I hope it brings you back to the table, right? It's I don't have to win every night. I just win consistently. I'm winning more than I'm losing, and that's okay with me. I don't expect to clear out the table every night. There are players that I've seen that are mad when they don't win every chip at the table.
Yeah.
And it's okay to have an ego. Poker players are going to, right? A little bit of an ego.
We're a special breed. Yeah.
That is not a realistic mindset, from my experience anyway, to expect to take every chip at the table, right? Yeah.
I mean, unless you're in a winner-take-all tourney, that's just not how it works.
I'm not talking about
yeah.
Tournaments are different.
Different, yeah.
So, to play to the end, hey, speaking of tournaments, do you split, like, at the end?
Once in a while we would. Now, most of the tourneys I did in person were from home games, because a lot of the times I played poker was kind of a weird time. It was after the Chris Moneymaker became big and kind of blew up for the first time. So even when you had your, I guess, I'm assuming the statute of limitations is gone, illegal home games, they would almost structure them like tournament buy-ins, which was fantastic for me, because I was way more a tourney player. And so one or two times when there's a big pot, I'd be one of those where, look, no matter what, guys, I have to leave in 10 minutes, but I was one of the last players. And if it was just two of us, a lot of times you'd be like, okay, there's four of us left. The blinds are high. You know, the last two split, or whoever's left by 3 a.m. splits. And we have done that where you want to play it out. And it's kind of fun when you do, to be honest, because, you know, I don't need the full $10,000 pot. I'm a freaking grad student. But, you know, if four of us suddenly have no pressure because we're all getting a cut, we're all way ahead in the night, you just get the fun, you have the last few minutes. You still want to play to see who can win. But yeah, I think splits, I never feel obligated to take a split. But if there's a situation, and in fairness, if I had said that and they'd said, Shane, we're not splitting, I would have played through and just, you know, missed my thesis defense the next day because priorities. But, you know. Yeah. I think it's okay. I think that's a solid play, and I definitely, like, when you get to pro levels, if by some fluke I ever made World Series of Poker and got to a final table, yeah, I would have
I'd agree to split.
I would agree to split.
If somebody, yeah, shit, that's because I'd be outclassed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
and I'd be set for life. So to me, it's a good practice. I never feel obligated to do it, but usually I am very good with a handshake. Like the only times, and I don't think I've ever had a bad faith split ask happen.
I've seen it.
But if someone came bad faith, like, okay, we're all awake, we all played how we played, I have 90% of the chips at the first break with 3 of us left, don't ask me for a split.
Right. That's just, you're just like, do you want to, no.
Like,
I'm going to run over you.
Like, if there's a table of 6 of us, and we've all been fighting back and forth, or about even, great, split. Even if I was like 2-1, if it was still pretty even, and having twice as many chips as number 2 didn't put me that far ahead, I consider it based on the table situation. But yeah, if I have 950,000 in chips and you have 50,000, the blinds are 50,000, we're not splitting, you know?
Yeah.
Fortunately, I've never had a bad face
But
split.
you can concede. That's the right move at that point.
Yeah.
Just go in every hand until it snaps off on you, because that's...
it's going to happen.
And I'm going to call you no matter what. If I'm in Shane's position, you're going to call, because even if they hit it, they have to double up like 8 times in a row to be
a threat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have seen a bad faith as a poker dealer. I have seen that bad faith split happen. So here's, and this is very rare. This.
Yeah.
I'd almost consider this a cheat. So, guy agrees to split in a game, in a 3-player game, right? They were down to the last 3, and they said, okay, we'll all split. You still have to play out to a winner, right? That's the rules. So they all just end up going all in on every hand, and one person takes third, one person takes second, one person takes first, and then you settle up. The casino has to pay out to each person, right? And then you guys go off to the side and you settle up.
Mm-hmm.
That's how this works. The casino has to pay each winner, because that's how it works.
That's how the structure is. Yeah.
I have seen in at least one case where the guy agreed to split, and he ended up taking the first place thing, got his money, and just basically left the casino immediately and never came back. And
No,
there was nothing that anybody could do about it.
it's a good thing he didn't come back, because
He was, yeah.
being blacklisted from the group for life is the best case scenario there. I have played in groups where that person would legitimately have to fear for their life if they came back after doing that bad faith a deal.
Right. If people knew you, you're never finding a home game.
Yeah, period.
Like, you're
that's
just done. Right at that point. You're never playing, or at least you're never playing in my home game if you're going to do that sort of thing. But also, if you came back to play in those tournaments again ever, everyone is going to have a target on your back.
Yeah.
Bad blood, right? You're always going to find somebody that's going to call you when you wish they didn't.
Like, you think a slow player is going to get beat up by a table? That guy is.
And it wouldn't even be the 2 people that you screwed there.
Everybody
We're talking
would know.
everybody in that tournament that knows what you did will try to keep you out of that cash table.
The poker community talks, and they would let anybody who didn't know about you at that point if you did that.
To protect them.
Yeah. And that's the thing, too. And that's something I always loved about the poker communities. Like, we talked about a lot of gray areas, like, oh, I can see the edge of a card. And to some people, it seems shady, but there is a certain code of conduct that you cross that, and it's just, that's not okay. No exceptions. And that's something I did actually like about poker was, yeah, there were certain things where you knew what you were getting into with individual games or tourneys, but there were always certain things where just, in the people who cared about the game, you did not do A, B, C. And you knew what the rules were. Like,
And most of it, it's common. Like, if you're a good person, you'll know most of this
and that's the thing.
by default, right? So,
yeah, I'll just kind of briefly go over some of the most common mistakes I see new players make.
Yeah.
And then I'd like each of us to end with one of our favorite stories. Because we have plenty.
We have.
In case you couldn't tell already.
Yeah.
So most common mistakes, new players, don't bluff. You bluff way, way too much. You don't understand aggressive versus reckless. Because that comes with time. Like, oh, why did you bet with a weak hand here? Well, if you knew enough to read the table, if you knew enough to know you were in a strong betting position, if you know based on the flop they're chasing a flush that nobody hit, like, that's aggressive. Throwing out half your stack on 3-7 because you want to be aggressive, that's not aggressive. That's reckless.
That's my lucky hand.
That's, oh dear God, Callahan, we got a winner here. And then not reading the table. Because tables are so different. If you have a table full of calling stations, you don't bluff a single time. It makes no sense.
It makes zero sense.
If you have a table full of very, very conservative players, you play aggressively, and then when someone raises you, unless you have the huge cards, you back the heck off. And, learning to read the table, you have to adjust your style to whatever's going on. And it's like that old quote we love. If you're looking around for a sucker at the table and you can't see him, it's you.
It's you.
Which can be a great learning experience, but be very cautious of your play at that point.
I got into the game, well, especially when I was first started, where I was the sucker at the table, right? You get better. One of the best things that I ever did was getting in over my head.
Yeah.
Setting a limit of what I was going to lose and playing with people better than me.
It forces you to get very good very quickly.
Right.
And if you're a good sport about it, and if you're just, like you said, a decent human being, we're happy to teach others to help their game get better.
Yeah.
It's something we don't play poker just for the money. We genuinely love the game.
Some play just for the money.
Some play just for the money. In fairness, if you're really good.
Right.
But a lot of us, there's always the exceptions, but a lot of us really love the game too.
Right.
And especially on your way up, where you have the pros who, like, I would say like me, where I know where my place is in the hierarchy. I'm not shooting for the $1,000 a hand Vegas table, because, hey, these $10 to $20 tournament entries can make me several thousand a year when I can get to them. Right. That's a sweet spot for me. I enjoy it. It's fun, and I have a nice cash retirement on the side.
The another mistake, and I think I mentioned this before, your hand pre-flop, once that flop comes out, there is no invincible hand.
Yep.
Well, that's not true. There is an invincible hand when you flop it.
Yeah.
There's if you flop a straight flush, you're probably okay.
And for that one time, I had a pair of fours, and I flopped, and it gave me 4 of a kind. And I was feeling top of the world. There was like a diamond showing, the 4 of diamonds, just to put in my face was one of those. And the other person went flush chasing, despite needing 2 to hit. And when the cards flopped, there was a possibility of a straight flush, but it was one of those where like, oh, he has to have the 3 of diamonds and then the 7 of diamonds, and then he must get the other one. So it's like a 1 in 4,000 chance, and he hit it, and it busted me out of the tournament. And I was like, no, this face. Followed by it's 3 a.m. If I swear in my dorm room, I'm getting kicked out, and it's 40 below outside. That is unfortunate, because I have so much emotion. And somehow the computer survived.
Those happen.
Yeah. But the best hands, at some point you play long enough, you will get an insane hand that fails.
I've gotten 2 royal flushes. That's how many hands of poker I've played. I've gotten them.
Yeah.
Have you ever gotten one?
I have not. I have had 3 or 4 straight flushes. I've never had a royal flush, and that's with 20 years of playing.
I've had multiple straight flushes.
Yeah.
That'll come down to my story at the end. I'll tell you a straight flush example.
So, I will let you go with your story first, because then I'm going to go with my crazy Alaska home game one, because I think that's pretty good.
Okay, so here's my other tip.
Yep, go for it.
Know the game you're playing. So, most people start out with Holdem. My story is about no limit, it was pot limit, high-low Omaha.
Which is my second favorite game, by the way.
I love it. So, we got, in Holdem, you have 2 cards. You can play 1 card, or you can play 2 cards, whichever one gives you the better hand. In Omaha, you have to play 2 cards to make a hand. Okay? And it's a high-low. The person with the highest hand gets a card. Person with the lowest gets that. And usually you're going to split the low, so you shouldn't chase that. But that's irrelevant. So, in a game I was in, and this was while I was a poker dealer, I was playing with other poker dealers who tend to be a little bit more loose and aggressive, right? Because they've seen it. Their job, they're watching hands for 8 hours a day, right? So you're picking up things while you're dealing if you also play. And I got in one, and people raised pre-flop, and there were a couple of other people that were new to the game. They had never played Omaha before, but they didn't want to wait for a Holdem game to break out. They were used to playing Holdem. They came over to Omaha. And everybody that plays Omaha makes this mistake the first time.
Yep.
So the flop comes out, and I just had kind of a garbagey hand, right? It was really crap. It was really low. I was just like, whatever. The flop comes out, giving me a straight flush. I had a 5 and a 7, and it hit the 6, 4, and 3. Okay? So I had that. And then I also had an ace, and I was missing... And I had an ace into the 3. I didn't care about that, but I was missing the low. I didn't have it, right? But I didn't care, because I knew I was going to get that top end. I flopped the straight flush. So I bet, because I was in opening position, I bet the pot. Pot limit's a little different, and my friend, one of them raises me, and my other friend calls. We get a whole bunch of other people that call. Like 8 people called this, and it rolls back around to me, and I say, pot. All right? At which point, my first friend that did the raise throws away his hand. He was a good conservative player. He had raised to feel out the strength. He caught a little piece of it. He's like, let's see where everybody's actually at, right? So he raised, everyone called, and it came back around to me, who raised again. And he goes, well, got all the information I needed. Gone, right? He's just like, no. And we still ended up, my other friend, very aggressive, he had the low. He had the nut low. He had an ace deuce, right? And the other guys kept raising me. All right? Next card out. Another club. All right, so now there's 4 clubs out there. And they just go insane. So it's just a raise back and forth between them and me. And my friend is just along for the ride. He got all his money in there at some point. He's just like, yep, all right. So, right? He's just sitting back, and we're just going back and forth. Final card comes out. It was a 2. This is the beautiful card. Counterfeited the low. Gave me the nut. So I now had the nut high and the nut low. And I got the rest of my money in there, and the guy calls. And we turn over our cards. And the guy's really excited. And he says, I've got the nuts. And he turns it over. And he's got 1 club. It's the ace of clubs. And the lady tells him, she goes, no, you have an ace high.
Because in Omaha, you must
play 2
from your hand.
And he didn't get it, right? He's just like, no, I have the nut flush. He's like, I have the nut flush. And I go, you don't, because you have to play 2 cards. But even if you did, and I just push my 2 cards up ahead, I go, and I just wait for him to realize it, because he didn't even see the straight flush out there. And he's just like, oh, right. And then I was like, I also ended up counterfeiting his low, so I swept it all. The whole thing. My friend is just like, damn it. He thought he was carving up the other half of that. He did end up getting... So now, instead of him getting the whole low, I had the same low as him, because he's playing an ace deuce, and I'm playing an ace 3, but I got to play the other 2 that was on the board.
So you end up having the same low.
So now I got 75%. So I got the entire high, because I had a straight flush. And then the low, we split up with everybody that just had their garbage hands. And now, instead of him getting that whole half, he had to split that half with me. I got 75%. and that goes into, that's also the tip. Know the rules for the game you're playing.
They're very good. And for me, my favorite one is, once again, it was a home game. And good for me, it was structured like a table game. Like, you put in your money, you bought chips. This was one where there was a rebuy, and it ended up going on for about 14 hours because the poker players up there were insane. in the best way possible. So a game that I thought, oh, this will be a table tour, this will be 6 hours. So 13 hours later, we're still playing, and there's this giant pot of like everyone's poker chips and the rebuys. I just had a really, really good day, and I knew how to play a good table game because tourneys were always my thing. That's how I made all my money online. I love the structure. I just have to win within the structure. All right, home turf. And got to the point at the end where I had my favorite hand pre-flop, which is 5-7 suited. I know it shouldn't be strong, but just one of those where for whatever reason, when I play 5-7 suited, it either misses completely and I get out cheap, or nobody ever thinks straight flush when it's a 4-6-8, because who thinks straight flush with a 4-6-8? Or, 3-4-6 also works, Just either
Straight flush
combination.
is a straight flush.
Yeah. And sure enough, it flops. And I'm just sitting here like, cool. My poker face is good because I am not jumping up and screaming like a little girl. There is nothing that can come up that breaks my nut straight flush right there. Because it was the 3-4 side, so I was just like, cool. I am in good shape. Because no one else can even get the straight flush that high because I have the middle cards that would break it up. And so, one of them had a straight. Because he had like an off-suited, same thing. One of them had ace-king clubs. So he thought he had the nut flush, which was almost correct. But not.
Right. And it's easy to get blinded by that. But even if I saw it, if I had the ace-king of clubs, depending on how much money is involved, I might say he might have the straight flush, but I have to pay to know.
Yeah, and in fairness, it was really good timing for me because I had two very, very strong hands where started strong, got the flop. And then about 30 minutes previous to that, I had, and it was a little bit of a faux pas because I was meaning to throw the cards away and they flipped up as they went.
Sure.
And it showed that I had bluffed them out of a pot, which I rarely do.
Oops.
And my instant reaction was immediately, sorry guys, I was not trolling, did not mean that. And they were happy for the information and furious at me because I bluffed them out of the pot. And so usually the cash games I played up there were relatively small. They weren't like huge things. This one for up there was big because we had like, it just started raising and ended up to about 12 grand and 2 pairs of car keys. I don't drive, but I had the nuts, so I wasn't going to fold. And so at the end of this home game, it's like, okay, so show them. And then the 5-7. And it just, there's that slight delay. And like, oh my God. Like, well, gentlemen, good news, bad news. Bad news is I won your cars. Good news, I don't have a license. So we need to work out a deal. Long story short, before Uber and Lyft were a thing, like 15 years before they were a thing, I could get taxi rides across Fairbanks, Alaska for an entire year. Because that was the deal. When I called and needed a grocery ride or wanted to hit the bar or it's 2 a.m. and I don't feel like walking home, I will give you your car back. But you're on call. And you know what? Good to their word. I never had to wait for a ride I called for, so it worked out really well. But it was just that, it was the epitome of what I call, you hear those old Wild West stories. To me, that was Wild West. I was in Alaska in a weird place when poker was exploding, the right time, the right hand, and just this great story where I'm buddies with these guys who give me rides across town because I let them have their car back after they lost a poker tournament to me. And then I spent a lot of the money because alcohol is expensive in Alaska. As everything is. But yeah, I was hooked, and the online thing is something I was getting better at, and then they outlawed it on a national level. And I was not in one of the 3 states that kept it legal, so...
Yeah. There's, I guess I will tell the one more story there. The one where I walked into the casino, right? And that I had never been in before. And I walked in the poker room and they said, "Oh, hey, Michael, yeah, we were wondering when you were going to make it out to ours." And I was like, "Yeah, I heard good things. I thought I'd check it out." I will give props. So I was like, "Do you have a game?" And they're like, "Yeah, go right over here." And I sat down. I sit down at the game, and I didn't even ask for chips. He just comes over. I hand him my bankroll. He takes out what he needs. and hands me the chips that I need to play in the game. And I sit down. And I'm looking at the rest of the table, kind of sizing them up. And everybody out there is just chatting, and they're all happy and everything like that, except for one guy who just... He saw it happen. He heard the exchange with the pit boss. He was paying attention, right? And saw me sit down and him just bring me chips. And the first hand came out, and I won. I won the first hand. And he's still just looking at me, just eyeballing me across the table. And I won the second hand and the third hand. And I bluffed the third hand out. After I had a good hand in the first two, I bluffed that third hand out. And that guy is just sitting there looking at me, who had a decent amount of chips in front of him because he'd been running that game. He just goes and just grabs a rack and just starts stacking up his chips. That guy was a good player.
Yeah.
He recognized, he goes, I don't like this. Right? And he took his money that he had won and he left. And then I just ate that table alive for the rest of the night. They were so nice and so bad. It was
the best combination.
It was right. And they didn't mind. It was a bunch of doctors and lawyers that didn't mind losing the money. And I was the only one at the table that actually was there playing poker for money, like for a living. They were there to chat and socialize and everything like that, except for that other guy. And he got out. We could have split the money, but he didn't want to risk what he had already earned. And there's nothing wrong with that.
That's a smart play. And so, guys, what are your stories? What are your favorite poker games? Do you have any stories from the golden days? Are you in states where this is still allowed and you are having a heyday and have something you want to share? Let us know in the comments. The books we mentioned earlier will be down below. And as always, good gaming and read the table. Bye.
Have a good night, everyone.
If you like what you just saw, please support us by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more great gaming content.